One of the most advanced missile defense systems ever built may have just encountered a weapon it was never designed to stop. And the explosions lighting up the skies over Israeli cities might only be the visible part of a much deeper problem unfolding underneath. Over the past several days, footage spreading across the internet has shown something deeply unsettling. Waves of incoming rockets streaking across the night sky, interceptors launching in response, and bright explosions flashing over densely populated urban neighborhoods. Headlines are calling it an unprecedented urban attack, a massive rocket barrage targeting major population centers. But the real story may not be the number of missiles being fired. The real story may be the weapon hidden inside them. Because according to military analysts, Iran may have introduced a new type of missile warhead that quietly changes the entire equation of missile defense. And once you start looking at the numbers behind it, the mechanics of the warhead, the way it behaves once it opens in the sky, and the cost of stopping it, the situation begins to look very different. Some of the interceptors being launched to defend Israeli cities cost more than $2.5 million per shot, which raises a disturbing question. What happens when a defense system that costs millions of dollars every time it fires is suddenly forced to fight a weapon designed to overwhelm it? There is a number that people living in central Israel have suddenly learned whether they wanted to or not. 8 kilometers. That is the approximate radius within which a single cluster missile warhead can scatter its payload once it opens in the sky. And that single number changes the entire logic of how this battlefield works. Because unlike a traditional missile that explodes in one place, a cluster warhead behaves very differently the moment it reaches its target area. As the missile descends toward the city, the warhead opens high above the ground, releasing dozens of individual submunitions that begin falling silently toward the streets below. Not one explosion in one location, but dozens of smaller explosive charges spreading across an area the size of a small city. Rooftops, parking lots, sidewalks, apartment courtyards, anywhere gravity carries them. And this is where the problem for missile defense systems becomes far more complicated, because once the warhead opens and the submunitions separate, the battlefield suddenly transforms from one incoming threat into dozens of falling objects scattered across a wide urban area. At that point, the entire concept of interception suddenly becomes much harder to execute. One missile can release dozens of explosives, but every interceptor launched to stop it can cost millions of dollars. And this is exactly why military analysts are paying such close attention to this weapon, because the moment the warhead opens in the sky, the rules of engagement begin to change. And that's exactly where the real problem begins. The real danger of this weapon does not begin when the missile is launched. It begins at the exact moment the warhead opens in the sky. Because modern missile defense systems are designed around a very specific assumption, that every incoming missile is a single target. Radar detects it. Computers calculate its trajectory. An interceptor launches to collide with that one object before it reaches the ground. One threat, one interception attempt. Improve the intercept rate, and you improve protection. That logic has guided the design of missile defense systems for decades. But a cluster warhead quietly breaks that entire model at the worst possible moment. The missile still appears on radar as a single incoming target. Defense systems respond exactly as they were designed to. Interceptors launch, the system commits to the engagement, and then the warhead opens. Suddenly, the battlefield changes from one incoming missile to dozens of individual submunitions spreading across the sky. By the time this happens, interception has already reached its critical point. Even if the main body of the missile is destroyed after the warhead disperses, the submunitions are already falling toward the city below. No propulsion, no predictable trajectory, no realistic way to intercept each one individually. They simply fall where they fall. And that moment, the instant when a single missile becomes dozens of uncontrolled falling explosives, is exactly where the defensive architecture begins to lose control of the engagement. But the most dangerous part of this weapon may not be the explosions it causes. The most dangerous part may be the mathematics behind it. Because modern wars are not only fought with missiles and interceptors, they are fought with production lines, budgets, and the cost of every shot fired. And once you start looking at the numbers behind this conflict, the equation becomes uncomfortable very quickly and dangerously unsustainable. Some of the interceptors used to stop incoming ballistic missiles can cost roughly $2.5 million for a single launch. That is the price of one defensive attempt against one incoming threat. Meanwhile, many of the missiles being fired at those defenses can cost only a fraction of that amount to manufacture. A missile costing tens of thousands of dollars can force a defender to launch an interceptor worth millions. And when hundreds of missiles begin entering the battlefield, that imbalance starts multiplying rapidly. Because a defense system does not get to choose when it fires. If a missile is heading toward a city, the interceptor must launch every time, even if the price of that interception is measured in millions. Which means the real battle unfolding here may not only be a contest of technology, it may be a contest of endurance. And in modern warfare, the side that changes the economics of the battlefield often ends up changing the trajectory of the entire war. But here is where the story becomes even more unsettling. Because wars like this are not only decided in the sky above cities, they are decided in factories, in production lines, in the speed at which weapons can be built and replaced. Every interceptor that launches to stop an incoming missile immediately creates a new problem for the defender. It must be replaced. Manufacturing has to keep up with consumption. And in war, consumption can accelerate very quickly. Because if missiles are being launched faster than interceptors can be produced, even the most advanced defense system begins facing a slow but dangerous pressure. A missile defense network is strongest at the beginning of a conflict, when stockpiles are full and every battery is ready. But as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, every interception quietly drains those reserves, and rebuilding them takes time. Factories cannot suddenly produce thousands of interceptors overnight. Supply chains, electronics, rocket motors, guidance systems, all of it requires months of manufacturing capacity. Which means the real strategic question slowly begins to change. It is no longer just about whether a missile can be intercepted. It becomes whether the defense system can sustain the pace of interception over time. And in wars driven by large numbers of relatively inexpensive weapons, that question becomes more dangerous with every passing day.
But the most dangerous moment for any defense system does not arrive when the first missiles appear on radar. It arrives much later, when the system begins to feel the strain of constant engagement. Because missile defense networks are designed to stop attacks, but they are not built to fight an endless stream of incoming threats forever. Every interceptor fired reduces the number available for the next attack. Every engagement slowly draws down the defensive stockpile. And when attacks continue day after day, the pressure on those reserves begins to grow. At first, the system still performs exactly as designed. Interceptors launch, incoming threats are destroyed, cities remain protected. Each interception looks like a victory, but each one also empties the magazine a little further. And underneath that success, another process is quietly unfolding: the gradual consumption of the defensive arsenal. Because rebuilding that arsenal is not instant. Interceptors require complex electronics, precision guidance systems, rocket propulsion, and highly specialized manufacturing.
Each one takes time to produce, which means the real danger in a prolonged conflict is not simply whether a missile can be intercepted today. The danger is whether the defense system can maintain that pace of interception tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because if the rate of incoming attacks begins to approach the rate at which interceptors can be produced, even the strongest defensive shield can start facing a very uncomfortable reality. Not failure in a single moment, but exhaustion over time. But the danger of these weapons does not end when the explosions stop. In fact, one of the most serious threats begins after the attack itself is already over. Because cluster warheads do something that conventional missiles usually do not. They leave behind unexploded submunitions scattered across neighborhoods long after the sirens fall silent. Each of those small devices was designed to detonate on impact, but not all of them do. Some land without exploding, hidden in streets, gardens, rooftops, or debris from damaged buildings. And that is where the danger quietly shifts from the battlefield to everyday life. Because those unexploded submunitions can remain active for days, weeks, sometimes even months. To someone walking past, they may look harmless, a small metal object lying on the ground, something that appears out of place but not immediately dangerous. But inside each one is still a live explosive charge, waiting for pressure, movement, or accidental contact. Which means the battlefield does not simply disappear when the missiles stop falling. It lingers in the spaces where civilians live and move every day. Streets that must be searched, parks that must be cleared, neighborhoods that bomb disposal teams may spend weeks securing. And this is why cluster munitions have become one of the most controversial weapons in modern warfare. Because long after the fighting moves on, the danger they leave behind often continues to affect the people who live there. But the most important question raised by this weapon may not be about this war alone. It may be about what it reveals for the future of warfare itself. Because conflicts in the modern world are no longer decided only by who has the most advanced technology. Increasingly, they are decided by who can change the mathematics of the battlefield. And that is exactly what this weapon appears to do. A defense system built to intercept individual missiles suddenly finds itself confronting dozens of falling explosives released from a single warhead. An interceptor that costs millions of dollars is forced to respond to a weapon that may cost only a fraction of that amount to build. And when that equation repeats itself again and again, the strategic balance begins to shift in ways that traditional military planning never fully anticipated. Which brings us back to the claim behind this entire story. Iran may have found a weapon that Israel's $2.5 million interceptor cannot fully solve. Not because the defense technology is weak. In fact, systems like Iron Dome, David's Sling, and long-range interceptors represent some of the most advanced defensive technologies ever created. But even the most sophisticated defense architecture was designed for a specific type of threat. When a different kind of threat appears, one that multiplies targets, stretches interceptor resources, and shifts the economics of every engagement, the challenge changes completely. And that may be the real signal emerging from this conflict, not just about missiles or interceptors, but about a new era of warfare where the side that changes the math of the battlefield can suddenly place even the most advanced defenses under extraordinary pressure.